The lilies had begun to wilt. Their sweetness was too heavy for the Hampton air, and Maya Holloway could no longer tell whether it was her grief or the flowers that made it hard to breathe. 40 days had passed since her husband, Victor, was laid to rest. The house was still full of mourners, who came less to comfort her than to find where they now stood in the absence of the man who had built Sterling Reserve from nothing. Her son, Grant, wore his father's cufflinks and arrogance like matching ornaments. "Tomorrow," he said, smiling as if at a private joke, "I'll be sitting in Dad's office. You might want to start cleaning it, Mom. The bathroom, too." He thought he was being clever. He had no idea what waited for him. That night, while the last car pulled away and the house fell silent, Maya sat in her husband's study. The scent of sandalwood lingered on the leather chair. On the desk before her lay an unassuming folder, embossed leather, still sealed. Inside it, her husband's final wish. Victor's handwriting, neat and unyielding. "I, Victor Holloway, transfer all shares of Sterling Reserve, Inc. and full ownership to my wife, Maya Holloway." No lawyers, no son, no board, just her. But Maya did not smile. Instead, she reached for the worn notebook at the bottom of the desk drawer. Inside were names written in her looping script: Charlotte Dubois in Brussels, Mr. Sundaram in Sri Lanka, Monsieur Laurent on the French coast. They were the quiet web that held the company together, and it was time to make the first move. Calls were made in the deep hours of the night. They weren't business calls. They were conversations between old friends, stitched together by decades of faith and dinners and births and funerals. When she hung up, Maya knew the web would hold. By noon the next day, Grant issued his proclamation, a sweeping 20% cut in supplier prices and threats of replacement. To him, business was just math. To them, it was honor. 2 sunrises later, silence answered. Then came the storm. Brussels called first, outraged, insulted, betrayed. France followed, then Sri Lanka. Omnicorp's lawyers had already reached out, asking for contract confirmation ahead of acquisition. Maya listened. The orchid pot slipped from her hand and shattered at her feet. Her husband's company, their life's work, was to be sold to the very giant he despised. Not for survival, for greed. Grant and his shadow, Arthur Vance, had planned it all, and in that moment, grief gave way to something colder. It was not vengeance she felt, it was duty. When Grant strode into the boardroom of glass and chrome to meet the Omnicorp executives, he wore victory like a tailored suit. His presentation was flawless, his arrogance blinding. They were minutes away from signing when the warehouse manager burst in, breathless and confused. "Sir, all shipments have stopped. Every supplier. They've canceled everything." The room froze. The Omnicorp men exchanged looks, detached, clinical. "It appears," one said, closing his laptop with a soft click, "the subject of negotiation no longer exists." Grant Holloway watched his empire dissolve before his eyes, built on someone else's bones. By dusk, Tyre screamed at the gates of the Holloway estate. Grant stormed through the rose garden, eyes wild, Arthur at his side. "Mom, what did you do?" he shouted. "You ruined us! You ruined me!" Maya did not raise her voice. She clipped a dead rose and placed it neatly into her basket. "I did nothing," she said. "You destroyed trust. You sold your father's soul for a balance sheet." Then she lifted the leather folder. "Read it." Arthur took it first, his face drained of color with every line. Grant snatched it next, disbelief turning to horror. "That can't be true." "Oh, it is," Maya said.
Sterling Reserve belongs wholly to me, and as of now, neither of you belong to it." Her voice was calm, resolute. "You have 1 hour to clear your things. Leave this house and my sight." The wind stirred the roses. Neither man spoke again.
The next morning, Maya walked into the Sterling Reserve headquarters. For the first time, everyone rose when she entered. The portrait of her husband was returned to its rightful place. Omnicorp received a letter ending all contact. Arthur received a subpoena. Then, months later, in a bright tasting room filled with laughter, Maya launched a new creation, a pear and brandy confection called the Charlotte. It was rich, golden, and perfumed with friendship, a product not born of greed, but of memory. She raised her glass to her friends, the same hands that had held hers through the storm. "To loyalty," she said. "To legacy," Charlotte added. "And," Maya smiled, "to freedom." Years later, people still spoke of the day Sterling Reserve nearly fell, and how its widowed matriarch saved it without ever raising her voice. Some called her ruthless, others brilliant, but those who truly understood knew the truth. She hadn't fought for profits, she had fought for soul. And that is the one thing that, once lost, no empire can ever buy back.